The sound of sneakers squeaking against polished linoleum echoed through the empty hallway as Maya Chen clutched her schedule with trembling fingers. Riverside High School felt like a labyrinth of judgment, each classroom door a potential gateway to humiliation. She had promised herself this transfer would be different, that she'd find her place in this small Oregon town. But as the morning bell rang and students began flooding the corridors like a rushing tide, Maya's confidence crumbled like sand between her fingers. She didn't expect the first blow to come so quickly. "Watch where you're going, fresh meat." The voice cut through the morning chatter like a blade. Tyler Brooks, all 6 feet of quarterback swagger, had materialized behind her as she fumbled with her locker combination. His massive frame cast a shadow that seemed to swallow the fluorescent lighting above. Before Maya could turn around, his shoulder slammed into her back, sending her crashing face first into the metal door. Her books scattered across the floor, like fallen leaves, and the sound of papers rustling mixed with the cruel laughter that followed. Maya's cheek stung from the impact, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her pain. She pressed her lips into a thin line, tasting copper where her teeth had caught her tongue. The hallway had gone quiet except for the whispered commentary of students who preferred to watch rather than intervene. Maya had learned long ago that showing weakness only invited more predators to the feast. Tyler stepped closer, his expensive cologne mixing with the scent of floor wax and teenage anxiety. "You deaf or something?" I said, "Watch it." His voice carried the kind of authority that came from years of being untouchable, protected by his family's influence and his status as the school's golden boy. Behind him, Jake Thompson snickered, his loyalty to Tyler as unwavering as a dog's devotion to its master. Maya slowly gathered her scattered belongings, each movement deliberate and controlled. Her mother had always taught her that patience was a weapon sharper than any sword, though right now she wondered if Dr. Maya Chen had ever faced someone like Tyler Brooks. The other students began to disperse as the warning bell echoed through the halls, but Tyler remained planted like a tree refusing to bend in the wind. "You new girls always think you're special," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Maya could hear. "But this is my school, and you'll learn your place soon enough." His breath was hot against her ear, carrying threats wrapped in false friendliness. "Just ask Danny over there what happens when you don't fit in." Maya's eyes followed Tyler's gesture to where a slight figure hunched over a stack of books near the water fountain. Danny Martinez looked like he was trying to disappear into the walls themselves, his dark hair falling across his face like a curtain drawn against the world. His clothes hung loose on his thin frame, and Maya noticed the way he kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone who passed by. Even from across the hallway, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he flinched whenever someone walked too close. "Leave him alone," Maya found herself saying, though she wasn't sure where the words had come from. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the relative quiet of the hallway, it might as well have been a shout. Tyler's eyebrows shot up in surprise, then his expression shifted to something darker. "Excuse me?" Maya straightened to her full height, which still left her several inches shorter than the quarterback, but something in her posture had changed. The fear was still there, coiled in her stomach like a living thing, but it was joined by something else, something that tasted like iron and felt like fire. "I said leave him alone." The laughter that erupted from Tyler and Jake echoed off the lockers like gunshots. "Look at this, Jake. Fresh meat's got claws." Tyler's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "You have no idea how things work around here, do you? Danny's a loser, a waste of space who can't even throw a ball without falling over. If you're smart, you'll stay away from him and anyone else who doesn't matter." Maya's fists clenched at her sides, her nails digging crescents into her palms. She could feel the familiar sensation of her training rising to the surface, years of discipline and technique that her mother had insisted upon but never expected her to need. The memory of her sensei's voice whispered in her mind, "True strength is knowing when not to use your power." but watching Danny's shoulders shake as he pretended not to hear Tyler's words made Maya question everything she'd been taught about restraint. "Maybe you should worry about yourself instead of bothering people who just want to get to class," Maya said, her voice steadier now, despite the earthquake happening in her chest. Tyler stepped closer, close enough that Maya could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough to smell the mint on his breath that couldn't quite mask the underlying meanness. "You've got spirit, I'll give you that. But spirit won't save you when you're eating lunch alone in the bathroom because nobody wants to sit with the girl who thought she could mouth off to me." The late bell rang, its shrill cry cutting through, the tension like a referee's whistle. Tyler stepped back with a grin that promised future encounters wouldn't be so gentle. "This conversation isn't over, fresh meat, not by a long shot." He turned and strode away with Jake trailing behind him like a loyal shadow, leaving Maya standing alone in the now empty hallway. Her hands were shaking as she gathered the last of her scattered papers, and she realized that Danny had disappeared while she wasn't looking. The encounter had lasted less than 5 minutes, but Maya felt like she'd just run a marathon. Her heart was still pounding against her ribs, and she couldn't decide if the feeling in her stomach was nausea or adrenaline. As she made her way to her first class, Maya's mind raced with questions and regrets. Had she just painted a target? On her back on her very first day? Was defending a stranger worth the trouble that was sure to follow? But every time she considered backing down, she remembered the way Danny had tried to make himself invisible, the defeated slope of his shoulders that spoke of countless similar encounters. Maya had moved to Millbrook hoping for a fresh start, a place where her mother's demanding career as a surgeon wouldn't define her, where she could be just another face in the crowd. But as she slipped into her first period chemistry class and felt the weight of curious stares, she realized that anonymity might not be an option anymore. The teacher, Mr. Hammond, barely glanced up as Maya handed him her schedule. "Take any empty seat," he mumbled, already turning back to his equations on the whiteboard. Maya scanned the room, noting the way students had naturally segregated themselves into familiar groups. The popular kids claimed the back corner, their desks arranged in a loose circle that spoke of shared secrets and inside jokes. The academic achievers sat in the front row, notebooks already open and pens poised for action. And there, in the Saichuai middle section where nobody particularly wanted to be, sat Danny Martinez with an empty chair beside him. Maya didn't hesitate.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
She walked directly to the empty seat and settled herself beside the boy she'd defended, ignoring the whispers that followed her movement. Danny looked up in surprise, his dark eyes wide behind wire-rimmed glasses that had seen better days. "Is this seat taken?" Maya asked quietly, though she was already pulling out her notebook. Danny shook his head mutely, then seemed to remember his voice. "No, nobody sits there." His words were soft, barely audible above the scratch of pencils and rustle of papers. "Good," Maya said with a small smile. "I'm Maya, by the way." "Danny," he replied, his cheeks flushing pink. "You probably shouldn't sit here. Tyler doesn't like it when people are nice to me." Maya turned to face him fully, noting the way he instinctively hunched his shoulders as if preparing for a blow. "Tyler doesn't get to decide who I sit with," she said firmly. "Besides, you look like you actually pay attention in class, which is more than I can say for most people." A ghost of a smile flickered across Danny's face before disappearing again. "You really shouldn't have stood up to him earlier. He's not the kind of person who forgets things like that." "Neither am I," Maya replied, turning her attention to Mr. Hammond's lesson on molecular structures, though her mind was already working on a different kind of chemistry entirely. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." The chemistry lesson droned on like background noise as Maya found herself stealing glances at her new desk partner. Danny had pulled out a notebook filled with intricate sketches that had nothing to do with molecular bonds and everything to do with incredible artistic talent. Dragons soared across margins while detailed portraits of classmates captured expressions and emotions with startling accuracy. His pencil moved with the confidence his voice lacked, creating worlds on paper that seemed more vivid than the sterile classroom around them. "Those are amazing," Maya whispered during a moment when Mr. Hammond turned to write another equation on the board. Danny's hand immediately moved to cover his drawings, but not before Maya caught sight of a detailed sketch of what looked like a video game character mid-battle. "It's nothing," he mumbled. "Just doodling." "That's not doodling," Maya insisted, keeping her voice low. "That's real art. Do you want to be an artist?" For the first time since she'd sat down, Danny looked directly at her. His eyes held a spark that hadn't been there before, quickly dampened by what looked like years of disappointment. "I want to design games," he admitted quietly. "But it's not exactly a realistic career path according to my dad." Maya was about to respond when she felt eyes boring into her back. She turned slightly to see Tyler watching them with undisguised interest, his expression a mixture of amusement and calculation. He whispered something to the girl beside him, who giggled and glanced in Maya and Danny's direction. The ripple effect spread quickly through the popular section of the classroom, and Maya could practically feel the target on her back growing larger by the minute. But instead of fear, Maya felt something else stirring in her chest. It was the same feeling she'd had when watching bullies pick on smaller kids at her old school in San Francisco. The same righteous anger that had driven her to take martial arts classes in the first place. Her mother had always said that Maya had too much of her father's stubborn streak, inherited from a man Maya had never met, but whose influence seemed to surface whenever injustice reared its head. When the bell finally rang, signaling the end of first period, Maya noticed how quickly Danny began packing his things. His movements were efficient, practiced, designed to get him out of the classroom before anyone could corner him. But Maya was faster. "What's your next class?" she asked, falling into step beside him as they joined the stream of students flowing into the hallway. "Art with Ms. Peterson," Danny replied, clutching his notebook against his chest like armor. "But you don't have to walk with me, really. Tyler's probably already planning something, and being seen with me will just make it worse for you." Maya stopped walking, causing a minor traffic jam as other students flowed around them. "Danny, look at me." When he reluctantly met her eyes, she continued, "I didn't move 3,000 miles to let some overgrown quarterback dictate who I can be friends with. If Tyler has a problem with me talking to you, then Tyler can take it up with me directly." The conviction in her voice surprised even Maya herself. She'd never been the confrontational type, preferring to blend into the background and avoid drama whenever possible. But something about Riverside High, about Tyler's casual cruelty and Danny's resigned acceptance of it, made her want to fight back in ways she never had before. Danny stared at her for a long moment, and Maya could see him wrestling with hope and fear in equal measure. "You don't understand," he said finally. "Tyler isn't just mean. His dad owns half the businesses in town, including the one where my mom works. When Tyler decides he doesn't like someone, it doesn't just affect school. It affects everything." The revelation hit Maya like a physical blow. She'd known that small towns operated differently than big cities, but she hadn't considered how deeply the tentacles of influence could reach. In San Francisco, bullies were contained to school grounds. Here, apparently, they could reach into homes and livelihoods with equal ease. But instead of backing down, Maya felt her resolve hardening like steel in a forge. "Then it sounds like someone needs to stand up to him," she said quietly. "And it might as well be someone who doesn't have anything left to lose." Danny's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Maya adjusted her backpack straps, a gesture that had become habitual whenever she was preparing for a fight. Now, are you going to show me where the art room is, or do I have to wander around until I find it myself? A slow smile spread across Danny's face, transforming his entire appearance. For the first time since Maya had seen him, he looked like the teenager he was supposed to be instead of someone carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "It's this way," he said, gesturing down a corridor lined with student artwork. "And Maya? Thanks. Nobody's ever..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Just thanks." As they walked toward the art room together, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just crossed a line from which there would be no return. Tyler Brooks had made it clear that crossing him came with consequences, and Maya was about to find out exactly what those consequences looked like. But watching Danny's step grow lighter as they moved away from the crowd, seeing the way his shoulders straightened when he thought no one was watching, Maya knew she'd made the right choice. Whatever Tyler Brooks had planned for her, Maya Chen was ready to meet it head-on. After all, she hadn't survived 3,000 miles and a complete life upheaval just to be intimidated by a small-town bully with delusions of grandeur. The real question wasn't whether she could handle Tyler's retaliation. The question was whether Tyler was prepared to handle hers. The art room felt like stepping into another dimension entirely. Where the rest of Riverside High maintained the sterile efficiency of institutional beige and fluorescent lighting, Ms. Peterson's classroom exploded with color and creativity. Student paintings covered every available wall space, creating a patchwork of dreams and emotions that made Maya's chest tighten with unexpected longing. The smell of acrylic paint and charcoal dust hung in the air like incense, and for the first time since walking through the school's front doors, Maya felt like she could breathe properly. Danny immediately gravitated toward a corner table near the windows, where natural light streamed through glass panels that someone had decorated with translucent paint to create a kaleidoscope effect on the floor. His movements here were different than in the hallway, more confident, purposeful. This was clearly his sanctuary, the one place in the school where he felt safe enough to exist without constantly looking over his shoulder. "Maya Chen, I presume?" A warm voice drew Maya's attention to a woman in her 30s with paint-stained fingers and the kind of genuine smile that reached her eyes. Ms. Peterson wore a flowing purple cardigan over dark jeans, and her curly red hair was held back with what appeared to be a paintbrush. "I got your transfer paperwork this morning. Welcome to the only civilized corner of this academic wilderness." Maya couldn't help but smile back. "Thank you. I'm excited to be here." She gestured toward the walls of artwork. "This is incredible. Do students really create all of this?" "Every single piece," Ms. Peterson confirmed with obvious pride. "Art is where we discover who we really are beneath all the expectations and labels that get thrown at us. Speaking of which, why don't you take a seat wherever you feel comfortable, and we'll see what kind of artist lives inside Maya Chen." Maya found herself walking toward Danny's table without conscious thought. He looked up in surprise as she settled into the chair across from him, his dark eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and concern. Around them, other students were setting up their projects with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Maya noticed that most of them gave Danny's corner a wide berth, creating an invisible barrier that seemed as solid as any physical wall. "You really don't have to sit here," Danny whispered, his fingers drumming nervously against his sketchbook. "Tyler takes this class too, and when he sees you're still hanging around me..." "Let me worry about Tyler," Maya replied, pulling out her own art supplies. She'd packed them hopefully when her mother had mentioned that Riverside High had a strong arts program, though she hadn't expected to need them as armor against social warfare. "Besides, I want to see more of your game. Designs. That dragon you were drawing in chemistry looked like it belonged in a professional studio." Danny's cheeks flushed pink, but he opened his sketchbook to a fresh page filled with character concept art. Maya leaned closer, genuinely amazed by the level of detail and creativity displayed in each drawing. The characters weren't just visually stunning. They had personality, emotion, entire backstories written in the careful attention to their poses and expressions. "This is seriously professional quality work," Maya said, tracing the outline of a warrior woman whose armor told a story of countless battles. "Have you ever submitted any of these to game companies? Or entered any contests?" Danny's laugh was bitter and short. "My dad thinks art is a waste of time. He wants me to focus on practical subjects like math and science so I can get into a good college and study something that will actually pay the bills. He doesn't understand that. Game design is a real career that people make millions creating the worlds that others escape into." "What about your mom?" Maya asked gently, sensing the pain beneath Danny's casual dismissal. "She tries to be supportive, but she works for Tyler's dad at his construction company. She can't afford to rock the boat, especially not over something she doesn't really understand either." Danny's pencil moved across the page as he spoke, creating quick gesture drawings that captured the frustration and longing in his voice. "Sometimes I think about submitting my work anyway, but what if they reject it? What if my dad's right and I'm just wasting my time on fantasies?" Maya studied Danny's profile as he worked, noting the way his jaw tightened when he mentioned his father, the unconscious way his shoulders curved inward as if protecting himself from invisible blows. She recognized the posture from her own mirror. It was the stance of someone who'd learned that dreams were dangerous things to voice aloud. "You know what I think?" Maya said, pulling out her own sketchbook and flipping to a page covered with rough architectural drawings. "I think the people who tell us our dreams aren't practical are usually the ones who gave up on their own dreams too early." Danny looked up, his pencil freezing mid-stroke. "What are those?" "Building designs," Maya admitted, feeling heat creep up her neck. "I want to be an architect someday, design spaces that make people feel safe and inspired. My mom thinks it's a nice hobby, but she's pushing me toward pre-med because that's what she understands. She sacrificed everything to become a surgeon, and she can't imagine why I'd want anything different." For the first time since Maya had met him, Danny smiled without reservation. "These are amazing. Look at the way you've incorporated natural, light flow, and the way the spaces connect. Maya, this isn't hobby-level work. This is the kind of design that changes how people live." The validation hit Maya like a warm wave, and she realized how long it had been since someone had looked at her work and seen possibility instead of distraction. "Maybe we should both stop listening to people who can't see what we see," she said, quietly. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps and familiar laughter. Tyler Brooks entered the art room like a storm front, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere from creative sanctuary to something far more predatory. Jake Thompson flanked him as always, along with two girls whose perfectly styled hair and designer clothes marked them as members of Tyler's inner circle. Ms. Peterson looked up from helping another student, her expression cooling several degrees. "Tyler, you're late. Again." "Sorry, Ms. P," Tyler replied with the kind of charm that probably worked on most adults, but couldn't quite hide the arrogance underneath. Coach Williams needed to discuss strategy for Friday's game. His eyes swept the room and landed on Maya and Danny's table with laser focus. "I see we have some new seating arrangements today." Maya felt Danny tense beside her, his pencil gripping so tightly his knuckles went white. She wanted to reach out and touch his hand reassuringly, but she sensed that any gesture of comfort would only make things worse for him in the long run. Instead, she met Tyler's stare with one of her own, keeping her expression neutral despite the way her heart rate spiked. "Tyler, please find your seat so we can begin today's lesson," Ms. Peterson said firmly. There was steel beneath her artistic exterior, and Maya could see why this classroom served as a refuge for students like Danny. "We're working on expressive portraiture, focusing on capturing emotion through technique rather than mere representation." Tyler made a show of surveying the available seats before choosing one directly across the room from Maya and Danny, but positioned so that he had a clear line of sight to their table. His friends arranged themselves around him like satellites, creating their own gravitational field of whispered comments and pointed glances. Today, we're going to explore the concept of revealing truth through art, Ms. Peterson continued, moving to the front of the room with a grace that suggested she was used to commanding attention from reluctant teenagers. The greatest portraits in history don't just show us what someone looks like, they show us who they really are beneath the surface. Your assignment is to create a portrait of someone in this room, but I want you to capture their essence, not just their features. Maya felt a flutter of excitement at the challenge, her mind already working through composition and technique. She glanced at Danny, who was staring down at his sketchbook with the kind of intense focus that suggested he was trying to become invisible through sheer force of will. "Partners will be assigned randomly," Ms. Peterson announced, reaching for a basket filled with folded papers. "This is about pushing yourselves out of your comfort zones and really seeing your classmates, not just sticking with your usual groups." The room filled with nervous energy as Ms. Peterson began calling out pairs. Maya held her breath, hoping she'd be matched with Danny, but knowing the odds were slim. When her name was called alongside Emma Rodriguez, a friendly-looking girl. With kind eyes and an easy smile, Maya felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. "Danny Martinez and Tyler Brooks," Ms. Peterson announced, and Maya's blood turned to ice water in her veins. Danny's face went completely pale, and Maya could see his hands shaking as he clutched his pencil. Across the room, Tyler's expression shifted to something that might have been pleasure if it weren't so cold and calculating. The assignment had just become weaponized, and everyone in the room could feel the shift in atmosphere. "This should be interesting," Tyler said loudly enough for the entire class to hear. "I wonder what kind of truth I'll find when I really look at Danny." Ms. Peterson's eyes narrowed, clearly picking up on the undercurrent of threat in Tyler's voice. "Remember, class, this assignment is about respect and artistic integrity. Anyone who uses this as an opportunity for anything other than genuine artistic expression will find themselves in the principal's office with a failing grade." Maya caught Danny's eye and tried to communicate reassurance through her expression, but she could see that he was already retreating into himself, building walls that even her newfound friendship couldn't breach. The easy camaraderie they'd been developing over the past hour evaporated like morning mist, replaced by the familiar tension that seemed to follow Danny wherever Tyler was involved. Emma Rodriguez approached Maya's table with her art supplies, her warm smile faltering slightly as she took in the obvious tension. "Hey there, partner," she said softly. "I'm Emma. I've been watching you all morning, and I have to say, you've got some serious courage." "What do you mean?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Emma glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "Standing up to Tyler on your first day? Sitting with Danny when everyone knows Tyler has it out for him? Either you're incredibly brave, or you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." "Maybe a little of both," Maya admitted, setting up her easel so she could see Emma clearly while still keeping Danny in her peripheral vision. "But someone has to stand up to bullies, right? Otherwise, they just keep getting worse." Emma's expression grew thoughtful as she arranged her charcoal pencils. "You're not wrong, but Tyler isn't just any bully. His family basically owns this town, and he knows it. The last person who really challenged him ended up transferring schools after Tyler made their life absolutely miserable." Maya's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "It was 2 years ago. A senior named Marcus who was student body president. He tried to get Tyler suspended for cheating on a major test, had proof and everything. But within a week, Marcus's dad lost. His job at the bank, his mom's catering business, started losing all their major contracts, and Marcus found himself completely isolated at school. The family moved away before graduation." The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. Tyler's threat about his influence extending beyond school grounds wasn't just posturing. It was a promise backed by a demonstrated track record of destroying anyone who crossed him. Maya thought about her mother, about the fresh start they'd both been hoping for in Millbrook, and wondered if she'd just jeopardized everything by refusing to back down. But then she looked at Danny, hunched over his sketchbook as Tyler loomed over him with predatory satisfaction, and Maya felt her resolve harden rather than crack. Some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds were stacked impossibly. Thanks for the warning," Maya said quietly to Emma. "But I can't just stand by and watch someone get hurt when I know I could help." Emma studied Maya's face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I figured you'd say something like that. For what it's worth, there are more people at this school who are tired of Tyler's behavior than you might think. We just haven't had anyone willing to be the first one to stand up." Across the room, Tyler's voice carried over the general classroom chatter. "This is perfect, Danny. I'm really going to capture the essence of who you are. All that fear, all that weakness. It's going to make for a very honest portrait." Danny didn't respond, but Maya could see the way his shoulders curved inward, the way his breathing became shallow and controlled. She wanted to march across the room and put herself between them, but she knew that would only make things worse. Instead, she channeled her anger into her own artwork, using bold strokes and dramatic shadows to capture the strength she saw in Emma's determined expression. "You know," Emma said conversationally, positioning her easel so she could work while keeping one eye on the Tyler-Danny situation. "I've been thinking it's time this school had some new leadership. Student council elections are coming up next month, and I was thinking about running for president." Maya looked up from her sketch. "That sounds like a great idea. You'd have my vote." "Actually," Emma said with a small smile, "I was thinking about running with a partner, someone who's already proven they're not afraid to stand up for what's right, even when it's not easy. Interested in being my running mate for vice president?" The invitation hung in the air between them like a challenge and an opportunity rolled into one. Maya understood what Emma was really offering, not just a position in student government, but a platform to fight back against the toxic culture that Tyler had created. It was a chance to turn her instinctive protection of Danny into something bigger, something that could help more than just one isolated student. "I'd be honored," Maya said, and meant it. As the class period continued, Maya found herself stealing glances at Danny, who was enduring Tyler's psychological torture with the kind of quiet resilience that broke her heart. But she also noticed something else, the way other students were, watching the interaction with expressions that ranged from uncomfortable to outright disgusted. Emma had been right about there being more opposition to Tyler than was immediately apparent. When the bell finally rang, Tyler made a show of examining his sketch with theatrical satisfaction. "This really captures you perfectly, Danny," he announced loudly. "I think I'll enter it in the school art show. What do you think, everyone? Should Danny's portrait be displayed for the whole school to see?" Maya didn't wait to see Danny's reaction. She was across the room in 3 quick strides, her hand closing over Tyler's wrist before he could show the sketch to anyone else. "I think," she said in a voice that carried clearly through the suddenly silent classroom, "that you should keep your artwork to yourself unless you want me to share some observations about your character with the whole school." Tyler's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed dangerously. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm suggesting," Maya replied, not releasing his wrist, "that respect goes both ways. And right now, you're not showing much of it." For a moment, the entire room held its breath. Maya could feel every eye in the classroom focused on the standoff, could sense the weight of a moment that would define her place in the school's social hierarchy. Tyler was bigger, stronger, and had the backing of money and influence that Maya couldn't hope to match. But Maya had something Tyler didn't expect, the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of martial arts training, and a mother who'd taught her that backing down from bullies only encouraged them to find easier targets. "Let go of me," Tyler said, his voice low and dangerous. "Give me the sketch," Maya countered. "Maya." Danny's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the tension like a knife. "It's okay. Let him keep it." Maya turned to look at Danny, seeing the resignation in his eyes, the way he'd already accepted this latest humiliation as inevitable. But she also saw something else. A flicker of hope, as if he couldn't quite believe someone was willing to fight for him. "No," Maya said firmly, turning back to Tyler. "It's not okay. Give me the sketch, or I'll make sure Ms. Peterson sees exactly what kind of artistic expression you've been working on." Tyler's jaw clenched, and for a moment Maya thought he might actually try to physically remove her hand from his wrist. But then Ms. Peterson's voice cut through the standoff. "Is there a problem here?" The teacher's tone was deceptively mild, but Maya could see the steel in her eyes as she took in the scene. Maya's hand on Tyler's wrist, the sketch clutched in Tyler's other hand, Danny's pale face, and the ring of students watching with barely concealed excitement. "No problem," Tyler said quickly, crumpling the sketch and shoving it into his bag. "Just a creative difference of opinion." Maya released his wrist and stepped back, but she didn't break eye contact. "I'm glad we could resolve it peacefully," she said sweetly. Tyler's smile was all sharp edges and future promises of retaliation. "This has been educational," he said, shouldering his bag with deliberate casualness. "I look forward to our next class together." As students began filing out of the room, Maya turned to check on Danny, but he was already gone, having slipped away during the confrontation like smoke dissipating in wind. Emma appeared at Maya's elbow, her expression mixing admiration with concern. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen," Emma said quietly, "or the most foolish, possibly both." Maya gathered her art supplies with hands that were steadier than she'd expected. Tyler's not as untouchable as he thinks he is. Bullies like him rely on fear to maintain their power. Take away the fear, and they're just insecure teenagers with anger management issues. "I hope you're right," Emma replied, "because if you're wrong, this is going to get much worse before it gets better." As Maya left the art room, she couldn't shake the feeling that Emma was probably right. But watching Tyler's surprise when she'd stood up to him, seeing the hope flicker in Danny's eyes, Maya knew she'd crossed a line from which there was no retreat. Tyler Brooks had made it clear that he considered himself the undisputed king of Riverside High, but Maya Chen had just declared herself a challenger to his throne. The question now wasn't whether Tyler would retaliate. It was how far he was willing to go to maintain his position, and whether Maya was prepared to match him step for step in whatever war was about to begin. The cafeteria at Riverside High operated like a carefully orchestrated social ecosystem, with invisible boundaries as rigid as any prison walls. Maya clutched her lunch tray and surveyed the landscape of teenage hierarchy spread before her like a map of unspoken rules. The popular athletes claimed the center tables near the windows, their laughter echoing across the room with the confidence of those who'd never questioned their place in the world. Academic overachievers huddled near the back corner, textbooks propped open beside their sandwiches as they crammed for afternoon tests. The theater kids had colonized a section near the serving line, their animated discussions about upcoming productions creating a bubble of creative energy that seemed to repel more conventional students. And there, at a small table tucked against the far wall where the fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows, sat Danny Martinez with a book propped open beside his untouched apple. He looked like he was trying to read himself into invisibility, his shoulders hunched forward in a posture that screamed, "Please don't notice me," to anyone who cared to look. Most students had learned not to care, Maya realized, walking past Danny's table with the same studied indifference they might show a piece of furniture. Maya didn't hesitate. She walked directly to Danny's table and set her tray down across from him with enough force to make him look up in startled surprise. "Mind if I join you?" Danny glanced around the cafeteria nervously, as if checking for snipers positioned on the overhead beams. "Maya, you really shouldn't. Everyone's watching, and Tyler." He gestured vaguely toward the center of the room where Tyler Brooks held court at a table surrounded by his usual collection of admirers and hangers-on. "Tyler can watch all he wants. Maya replied, unwrapping her sandwich with deliberate casualness. I'm not going to let some overgrown quarterback dictate who I eat lunch with. She paused, studying Danny's pale face. Unless you don't want me here? I don't want to force my company on you if you'd rather eat alone. The question seemed to catch Danny off guard, as if the concept of having a choice in the matter was foreign to him. He closed his book slowly, Maya noticing it was a programming manual with pages flagged by dozens of colorful sticky notes. I just don't understand why you're doing this, he said quietly. You could sit anywhere in this cafeteria. You could probably even sit with Tyler's group if you wanted to. Why choose the social outcast table? Maya took a bite of her sandwich, using the moment to consider her answer. The truth was complicated, layered with memories of her own experiences being the outsider, her mother's stories about facing discrimination in medical school, and something deeper that she couldn't quite articulate. Maybe because you're the most interesting person I've met so far, she said finally. Tyler and his friends are exactly what they appear to be on the surface. But you're designing entire worlds in your spare time, teaching yourself programming, languages that most adults can't understand, creating art that belongs in galleries. Why would I want to waste time with people who peak in high school when I could spend it with someone who's just getting started? Danny's cheeks flushed red, and he ducked his head to hide what Maya was fairly certain was the beginning of a smile. You don't really know me yet, he mumbled. I'm not exactly exciting company. I spend most of my free time alone in my room coding or drawing. I've never been to a party, never had a girlfriend, never done any of the things that normal teenagers do. What makes you think I'm normal? Maya asked with a laugh. I've moved 6 times in the past 5 years because of my mom's residency programs. I've never stayed in one place long enough to have what most people would call a normal teenage experience either. Maybe that's why we get along. Their conversation was interrupted by the scrape of chairs being pulled back and the sound of approaching footsteps. Maya looked up to see Tyler Brooks standing behind Danny's chair, flanked by Jake Thompson and 2 girls whose perfectly applied makeup couldn't quite hide the calculating coldness in their eyes. The larger girl, a blonde with the kind of aggressive prettiness that came from hours of careful maintenance, smiled at Maya with all the warmth of a shark circling wounded prey. Well, well, Tyler said, his voice carrying across the nearby tables and drawing curious stares. Look what we have here. The new girls decided to adopt our resident charity case. He placed his hands on the back of Danny's chair and leaned forward, his physical presence looming over both of them like a storm cloud. Maya, isn't it? I think we got off on the wrong foot this morning. I'm Tyler Brooks. As they walked away from the table together, Maya could hear the explosion of whispered conversation that erupted in their wake. The sound of social media notifications as students frantically texted updates to friends who weren't present to witness the spectacle. Tyler's voice followed them across the cafeteria, pitched loud enough to carry over the rising chatter. This isn't over, Maya. Not even close. Maya didn't turn around, but she raised her voice enough to ensure her response would be heard clearly. I'm counting on it. They found refuge in the library, a surprisingly spacious room with tall windows that overlooked the school's courtyard. The librarian, Mrs. Henderson, looked up from her computer with the kind of welcoming smile that suggested she was used to providing sanctuary for students seeking escape from the social battlefield of lunch period. New faces, she said cheerfully. You must be Maya Chen. I got your transfer paperwork this morning. Welcome to my little kingdom of books and blessed silence. Maya felt some of the tension leave her shoulders as she took in the peaceful atmosphere of the library. Students sat scattered among the tables and carrels, most of them absorbed in homework or pleasure reading, creating an environment of focused quiet that felt like a balm after the aggressive energy of the cafeteria. Danny led her to a table in the back corner, away from the main traffic flow, but positioned so they could see anyone approaching. His hands were still shaking slightly as he unpacked his lunch, and Maya noticed that he kept glancing toward the entrance as if expecting Tyler and his entourage to burst through the doors at any moment. "You didn't have to do that," Danny said quietly, unwrapping a sandwich that looked homemade with the kind of care that spoke of a mother who worried about her son's nutrition. Standing up to Tyler like that in front of everyone. Now he's going to make both of our lives miserable. Maya settled into her chair, studying Danny's face in the softer lighting of the library. Away from the harsh fluorescence of the classroom and cafeteria, she could see details she'd missed before. The intelligence in his dark eyes, the way his features showed traces of both strength and sensitivity, the careful way he moved that suggested someone who'd learned to make himself small to avoid attracting unwanted attention. "Danny," she said gently, "were you happy with your life before I showed up? Were you content eating lunch alone every day, being invisible in the hallways, letting Tyler treat you like you don't matter?" Danny's laugh was bitter and hollow. "Happy? I don't think I remember what happy feels like, but at least I was safe. At least I knew what to expect each day." He took a bite of his sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. "My mom always says that sometimes the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know." "And what do you think?" Maya asked. Danny was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the window where afternoon sunlight painted golden rectangles on the library floor. "I think," he said finally, "that I've been so focused on surviving that I forgot there might be other options. But Maya, you don't understand what Tyler's capable of. He's not just a bully. He's smart, connected, and absolutely ruthless when someone threatens his position." Maya followed Danny's gaze to the window, watching students move across the courtyard below. Some walked alone with the hurried pace of those trying to avoid notice, while others moved in confident groups that parted crowds like ships cutting through water. The social dynamics were as visible from this height as they were up close. Patterns of power and submission played out in the simple act of walking from one building to another. "Tell me about the student who transferred," Maya said. "Emma mentioned someone named Marcus who challenged Tyler and ended up leaving town." Danny's expression darkened. "Marcus Williams. He was everything Tyler pretends to be, actually smart, genuinely popular, respected by students and teachers alike. He was student body president, valedictorian track, full scholarship to Stanford lined up. But he made the mistake of thinking that truth and justice mattered more than politics and money. What exactly happened?" Danny glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "Marcus caught Tyler cheating on the SATs. Not just regular cheating. Tyler's dad had hired someone to take the test for him using fake identification. Marcus had proof. Photos of the fake ID, testimony from other students who'd witnessed the setup. He presented everything to the principal, the school board, even contacted the college board directly." Maya felt her stomach clench with anticipation of what was coming next. But Tyler's family fought back. "Fought back doesn't begin to cover it," Danny said grimly. Within a week of Marcus filing his complaint, his father was fired from his position as a loan officer at the bank, where Tyler's uncle sits on the board of directors. His mother's catering business suddenly lost 3 major contracts, all with companies connected to the Brooks family empire. Anonymous complaints were filed with the health department about her kitchen, forcing her to shut down for expensive renovations she couldn't afford. The scope of the retaliation took Maya's breath away. She'd known that small towns operated differently than big cities, but the level of coordinated economic warfare described by Danny was beyond anything she'd imagined. And at school? Tyler launched a psychological campaign that was almost artistic in its cruelty, Danny continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Rumors about Marcus's family finances, suggestions that his academic achievements were based on cheating, anonymous social media accounts that shared embarrassing photos and personal information. By the end of the month, Marcus went from being the most respected student at Riverside to a complete social pariah. Maya felt a chill run down her spine as she considered the implications. And the cheating allegations against Tyler? Disappeared, Danny said simply. The evidence mysteriously vanished from the principal's office. The witnesses suddenly couldn't remember what they'd seen, and Tyler's SAT scores stood unchallenged. Marcus's family moved to Oregon 2 weeks before graduation. He lost his Stanford I scholarship and had to settle for a community college 3 states away. The story settled over them like a heavy blanket, casting Maya's confrontation with Tyler in an entirely new light. She'd thought she was standing up to a typical high school bully, but Danny's account painted a picture of someone far more dangerous, a young man backed by systemic corruption and willing to destroy lives to maintain his position. "Danny," Maya said carefully, "why are you telling me this? Are you trying to scare me into backing down?" Danny met her eyes directly for the first time since they'd sat down. He extended his hand with the kind of practiced charm that probably worked on adults and anyone who didn't look too closely at his eyes. Maya ignored the offered handshake, instead taking another bite of her sandwich with studied indifference. "I know who you are," she said after swallowing. "Your reputation precedes you." Tyler's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, but he maintained his facade of friendly interest. "I hope it's a good reputation. I like to think I make Riverside High a better place for everyone." His grip on Danny's chair tightened, knuckles going white with the pressure. "Speaking of which, I wanted to apologize for any misunderstanding we might have had in art class. Sometimes my competitive nature gets the better of me, you know? It's just that I care so much about this school and everyone in it." The blonde girl leaned closer, her voice honeyed with false concern. "I'm Brittany, by the way, Tyler's girlfriend. We were just talking about how sweet it is that you're being so nice to Danny. It shows real character to befriend someone who doesn't have much to offer socially." Her smile never wavered, but her words landed like carefully aimed darts. "Of course, you'll probably want to branch out once you get to know more people. There are so many opportunities to get involved at Riverside if you know the right people." Maya set down her sandwich and looked directly at Brittany, noting the way the girl's confidence flickered slightly under scrutiny. "You're right," Maya said pleasantly. "I am very interested in getting involved. In fact, Emma Rodriguez and I are running for student council president and vice president. Maybe you could help us spread the word about our campaign?" The request hung in the air like a challenge disguised as politeness. Tyler's expression shifted from fake friendliness to something much more genuine and considerably less pleasant. "Student council?" he repeated, his voice carefully neutral. "That's ambitious for someone who's been here less than 24 hours. Are you sure you understand how things work at Riverside?" "I'm a quick learner," Maya replied. "And I have some ideas about changes that might benefit everyone. Not just the people who are already at the top of the social food chain." Jake Thompson snorted with laughter. "What could you possibly know about running a school? You just got here yesterday." Maya turned her attention to Jake, noting the way he immediately took a half step back when she met his eyes directly. "You're right, I am new. But sometimes fresh perspective is exactly what a system needs, especially when the current leadership seems more interested in maintaining their own power than actually helping students." The temperature at the table seemed to drop several degrees. Danny had gone completely still beside Maya, his book clutched in white-knuckled hands as if it were a life preserver in turbulent waters. Other students at nearby tables had stopped pretending not to listen, their conversations dying away as they sensed the escalating tension. Tyler leaned down until his face was level with Maya's, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne and see the dangerous glitter in his eyes. "You know what I think?" he said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that only their table could hear. "I think you're confused about how things work around here. I think you need someone to help you understand the natural order of things before you make any serious mistakes." Maya leaned back in her chair, creating distance without appearing to retreat. "And I think you're overestimating your own importance. This isn't a kingdom, Tyler. It's a public high school. And every student here has the same rights regardless of who their parents are or how well they can throw a football. Brittany's perfectly composed mask slipped completely, revealing the mean-spirited girl underneath. "Listen, you little nobody," she hissed, leaning across the table until her face was inches from Maya's. "You have no idea who you're messing with. Tyler's family has connections that go all the way to the state capitol. They could make your pathetic little mother lose her job with a single phone call." The threat hit Maya like a physical blow, and she felt her carefully maintained composure crack slightly. The mention of her mother brought everything into sharp focus. The sacrifices Dr. Lisa Chen had made to build her career, the fresh start they'd both been hoping for in Millbrook, the precarious nature of their new life in a town where they had no roots or allies. But then Maya caught sight of Danny's face, saw the way his eyes had gone wide with a mixture of fear and something that might have been admiration, and she felt her resolve crystallize into something unbreakable. She'd faced down bigger bullies than Tyler Brooks, survived moves to 6 different cities, watched her mother claw her way through a medical system that seemed designed to break women like them. A small-town quarterback with delusions of grandeur wasn't going to intimidate her into abandoning the first real friend she'd made in years. "You know what's interesting about threats like that?" Maya said conversationally, her voice carrying clearly to the surrounding tables. "They only work if the person making them actually has the power to follow through. And they only work if the target is too scared to fight back." She stood up slowly, her movement causing Tyler to straighten and take a step backward. Maya wasn't particularly tall or physically intimidating, but there was something in her posture that spoke of coiled strength and absolute determination. "Here's what I think, Tyler. I think you're used to getting your way because people in this town are afraid of your family's money and influence. I think you've built your entire identity around being untouchable, and the idea that someone might not be impressed by your act terrifies you." The cafeteria had gone completely silent now, hundreds of students hanging on every word of what was clearly becoming the most dramatic confrontation Riverside High had seen in years. Maya could feel the weight of their attention, the electricity of a moment that would be dissected and analyzed for weeks to come. "I also think," Maya continued, picking up her lunch tray with deliberate calm, "that you're about to learn what happens when someone isn't afraid of you. Good luck with that." She turned to Danny, who was staring at her with an expression of complete awe and terror. "Want to finish lunch somewhere with better air quality?" Danny nodded mutely, gathering his things with hands that shook only slightly. "I'm telling you because you deserve to know what you're up against. Because if you're really determined to fight Tyler, you need to understand that this isn't just about high school social dynamics. This is about taking on an entire system of power and privilege that's been in place for decades." Maya absorbed this information, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She thought about her mother, working long hours at the hospital to build a new life for both of them. She thought about Emma's invitation to run for student council, about the hope she'd seen flickering in Danny's eyes when someone finally stood up for him. She thought about Marcus Williams, whose pursuit of justice had cost him everything he'd worked for. What if someone was smart enough to learn from Marcus's mistakes? Maya asked. What if someone approached this differently, built alliances, instead of fighting alone, documented everything, and made it impossible for Tyler to retaliate without exposing himself? Danny's eyes widened slightly. "Maya, you can't be serious. You've been here one day. You don't have the connections, the resources, or the protection to take on the Brooks family." "Maybe not," Maya agreed. "But I have something Marcus didn't have. I have nothing left to lose. My mom and I have already started over 6 times. If we have to do it again, we will. But I'm not going to spend the next 3.5 years watching Tyler Brooks destroy people just because no one has the courage to stop him." The conviction in her voice seemed to surprise even Maya herself. She'd always been more comfortable avoiding conflict than confronting it, preferring to blend into new environments rather than making waves. But something about Riverside High, about Tyler's casual cruelty and the resigned acceptance of students like Danny, had awakened something fierce and protective in her chest. Danny stared at her for a long moment, and Maya could see him wrestling with hope and fear in equal measure. "If you're really going to do this," he said finally, "you can't do it alone. Tyler's too smart and too connected to be taken down by a single person, no matter how brave they are." "Then help me," Maya said simply. "You know this school, these students, the history of how Tyler operates. Help me figure out how to beat him at his own game." Danny's laugh was shaky, but genuine. "You realize that if I help you, there's no going back for me either? Tyler will make sure I'm completely destroyed, along with anyone else who stands with you." Maya reached across the table and touched Danny's hand gently, noting the way he didn't pull away. "Danny, look at me. Really look at me. Do I seem like the kind of person who abandons her friends when things get difficult?" For the first time since Maya had met him, Danny smiled without reservation, a real smile that transformed his entire face and made Maya's heart do something complicated. In her chest. "No," he said softly. "You really don't." As they sat together in the peaceful sanctuary of the library, surrounded by books and afternoon sunlight, Maya felt something shift between them. What had started as simple friendship was evolving into something deeper, more complex. She found herself noticing details about Danny that had nothing to do with their shared opposition to Tyler. The way his eyes lit up when he talked about his art, the gentle way he handled his books, the quiet strength that had allowed him to survive years of systematic intimidation without losing his essential kindness. The war with Tyler Brooks was just beginning, but Maya realized she might be fighting for more than just justice or social change. She might be fighting for the chance to see what could grow between herself and the boy who was teaching her that sometimes the strongest people were the ones who'd learned to endure in silence, waiting for someone brave enough to stand beside them in the light. The nomination papers felt heavier than they should have as Maya placed them on Principal Harrison's desk Friday morning. 3 days of intensive campaigning had transformed what started as an impulsive decision into a full-scale movement that had captured the attention of the entire school. Students who had never spoken to each other found themselves united under the banner of change that Maya and Emma represented, while Danny's technical expertise had created a digital network that bypassed Tyler's traditional channels of influence and intimidation. Principal Harrison examined the forms with the kind of careful attention that suggested he understood the significance of what was happening. A man in his late 50s with graying hair and tired eyes, he had the look of someone who had spent years navigating the treacherous waters of small-town politics, while trying to maintain some semblance of educational integrity. The morning sunlight streaming through his office windows caught the dust motes dancing in the air, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere that belied the gravity of the moment. "Miss Chen, Miss Rodriguez," he said finally, setting the papers aside with deliberate precision. "I trust you understand that student council positions come with serious responsibilities. The president and vice president serve as liaisons between the student body and administration, and they must be prepared to work within established systems and protocols." The warning was subtle but unmistakable, and Maya recognized it for what it was: a gentle suggestion that they should consider backing down before things escalated beyond anyone's control. Emma stepped forward with a folder containing their campaign platform, a detailed document that focused on transparency, equal enforcement of disciplinary policies, and expanded opportunities for student involvement in school governance. "We've spent considerable time researching successful student government initiatives at other schools," she added, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. "Our proposals are both practical and achievable within existing budget constraints." Principal Harrison accepted the folder, but didn't open it immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and studied the two young women before him with an expression that mixed admiration with genuine concern. "I'm sure your intentions are admirable," he said, his tone suggesting that good intentions were often insufficient for navigating complex institutional realities. However, I feel obligated to point out that student elections can sometimes become contentious, particularly when candidates have different philosophical approaches to leadership. Maya understood that Principal Harrison was trying to protect them without explicitly acknowledging the forces they were challenging. Tyler Brooks wasn't just another student in his eyes. He was the son of one of the school district's most influential board members, a family whose financial contributions and political connections had shaped Riverside High's policies for years. The framed photographs on Harrison's desk told their own story. Groundbreaking ceremonies for new facilities, award presentations featuring prominent community members, all of them bearing the Brooks family name in one form or another. As they left the principal's office, Maya noticed Tyler waiting in the hallway with Jake Thompson and two other members of his inner circle. His posture radiated confidence, but there was something different about his expression. A tightness around his eyes that suggested Maya's refusal to be intimidated had genuinely surprised him. For someone accustomed to getting his way through a combination of charm and veiled threats, encountering genuine resistance was clearly an unfamiliar experience. The hallway around them buzzed with the usual morning energy, but Maya could sense the undercurrent of anticipation that had been building all week. Word of their campaign had spread through the school's social networks with the speed of wildfire, creating divisions and allegiances that cut across traditional social boundaries. Students who had never paid attention to student government were suddenly engaged, recognizing that this election represented something far more significant than the usual popularity contest. "Well, well," Tyler said as Maya and Emma approached, his voice carrying the smooth confidence that had served him well in countless social situations. "I hear congratulations are in order. You've officially entered the race." His smile held all the warmth of a shark preparing to feed, and Maya could see the calculation behind his seemingly casual demeanor. "I have to admit, I'm impressed by your persistence. Most people would have gotten the message by now." Emma bristled beside Maya, her journalist's instincts picking up on the implied threat beneath Tyler's words. But Maya maintained her composure, drawing on the lessons her mother had taught her about dealing with difficult personalities in professional settings. "Thank you, Tyler. I'm looking forward to a spirited campaign focused on the issues that matter to students." She paused, letting her words carry the weight of challenge disguised as pleasantry. "May the best candidates win." Tyler's laugh was sharp and humorless, echoing off the metal lockers that lined the hallway like a hollow percussion. "Oh, Maya, you really have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, do you? This isn't going to be the kind of friendly competition you're imagining. Student council at Riverside has always been about maintaining stability and supporting the administration's vision for our school community." The threat was barely veiled now, and Maya could see other students in the hallway slowing their pace to listen. Tyler was performing for an audience, demonstrating his power while creating plausible deniability about his actual intentions. The morning light filtering through the tall windows cast long shadows across the floor, and Maya found herself thinking about the symbolism of light and darkness, of truth emerging from the shadows where it had been hidden for too long. Before she could respond, a new voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Actually, Jake, I think fresh perspective is exactly what this school needs." Danny emerged from the crowd of onlookers, his art portfolio tucked under one arm and his chin raised with newfound determination. The transformation from the hunched, invisible boy Maya had first encountered was remarkable. Danny carried himself now with the confidence of someone who had found his purpose and was no longer afraid to claim his space in the world. Tyler's expression shifted to something darker and more personal as he focused on Danny. The easy confidence he'd displayed when confronting Maya and Emma evaporated, replaced by the kind of cold fury that came from having his authority challenged by someone he considered beneath contempt. "Well, look who decided to crawl out of his hole. I was wondering when you'd show up to support your girlfriend's little campaign." The way Tyler said girlfriend made it sound like an accusation, loaded with implications about Maya's judgment and Danny's worthiness. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks, but not from embarrassment. The protective instinct that had first drawn her to Danny's defense blazed brighter now, fueled by 3 days of getting to know the brilliant, kind, creative person hidden beneath years of systematic intimidation. "Danny's not just supporting our campaign," Maya said clearly, her voice carrying with the kind of authority that came from absolute conviction. "He's our technology coordinator. Turns out the kid you've been calling worthless has skills that put your little social media presence to shame." The revelation clearly caught Tyler off guard, and Maya could see his mind working to process this unexpected development in his carefully constructed worldview. Danny stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Tyler with steady, measured steps. The physical difference between them was still dramatic. Tyler remained bigger, stronger, more conventionally imposing, but something fundamental had shifted in their dynamic. The fear that had once defined Danny's interactions with his tormentor had been replaced by something far more dangerous to Tyler's sense of superiority: complete indifference to his opinion. "You know what, Tyler?" Danny said, his voice carrying clearly through the hallway that had gone almost completely silent. "You're absolutely right. I have spent a lot of time learning technology while you've been coasting on your family's reputation. The difference is, my skills actually matter in the world we're heading into, while your ability to intimidate teenagers is becoming increasingly irrelevant." The challenge was direct and unmistakable, delivered with the kind of quiet confidence that was far more threatening than bluster or posturing. Maya watched Tyler's face cycle through confusion, anger, and something that might have been respect before settling back into its usual mask of superiority. But the mask fit less perfectly now, and cracks were beginning to show around the edges. "We'll see about that," Tyler said finally, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "Elections are about more than fancy websites and social media tricks. They're about leadership, about understanding how things really work, about having the connections and experience to get things done." He turned his attention back to Maya, his gaze calculating and cold. "You've got 2 weeks until the vote. Maya, that's a lot of time for people to remember why the current system works so well for everyone." As Tyler and his entourage moved away, their footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet hallway, Maya felt Danny's hand brush against hers, a brief, warm contact that sent electricity up her arm and reminded her of everything they were fighting for beyond politics and social justice. The simple gesture carried more meaning than any grand romantic declaration, speaking to the deep connection that had formed between them in such a short time. Emma exhaled slowly beside them, the tension leaving her shoulders now that the immediate confrontation was over. "Well," she said, "I think it's safe to say that Tyler considers us a legitimate threat now. The question is whether we're ready for what comes next." Her voice carried a mixture of excitement and apprehension that perfectly captured the mood of the moment. Maya looked around the hallway, noting the students who had witnessed the exchange. Some looked excited by the prospect of real change, their faces lit with the kind of hope that had been absent from Riverside High for too long. Others appeared nervous about the brewing conflict, understanding instinctively that the comfortable predictability of their social order was about to be disrupted, and a few seemed calculating as they considered which side offered the best opportunities for personal advancement. "We're as ready as we can be," Maya said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "The real test starts now." As the warning bell rang and students began moving toward their first period classes, Maya felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, like a mantle she had never asked for but was determined to wear with dignity. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a masterclass in political warfare adapted for the unique ecosystem of high school social dynamics. Tyler's campaign launched with the kind of professional polish that money could buy. Glossy posters featuring action shots from football games, a social media presence managed by someone who clearly understood modern marketing techniques, and endorsements from teachers and administrators who owed their positions to the Brooks family's influence. But Maya and Danny's grassroots approach proved surprisingly effective at countering Tyler's institutional advantages. Danny's technical skills created platforms that allowed students to share their experiences anonymously, revealing patterns of favoritism and selective enforcement of rules that many had experienced but never documented. Emma's coalition-building efforts brought together diverse groups that had never cooperated before, united by shared frustration with a system that seemed designed to benefit only those already at the top. The campaign's turning point came during the mandatory candidate debate, held in the school auditorium with the entire student body in attendance. The auditorium itself seemed to reflect the gravity of the moment, its worn red seats and faded gold curtains speaking to decades of school traditions, while the modern sound system and lighting suggested an institution struggling to balance heritage with progress. Tyler approached the podium with his usual swagger, confident that his practiced charm and superior resources would carry the day. He wore a navy blazer that probably cost more than most students' entire wardrobes, and his hair was styled with the kind of casual perfection that required significant time and money to achieve. Maya felt her heart hammering as she took her place behind the opposing podium, acutely aware that this moment would likely determine not just the election's outcome, but the future trajectory of her time at Riverside High. When the debate concluded and the votes were finally counted, Maya found herself standing at the podium, accepting victory, with a mixture of elation and trepidation. The margin had been closer than she'd hoped, but decisive enough to be meaningful. Tyler's concession speech was gracious in the way that had been drilled into him by years of political coaching, but Maya could see the fury burning behind his diplomatic words. As she looked out at the assembled students, Maya caught sight of Danny in the crowd, his face radiant with pride and something deeper that made her heart skip beats. The boy who had started the week invisible and voiceless was now part of a movement that had successfully challenged the most powerful family in town. More importantly, he was looking at her with the kind of love that had nothing to do with politics or social status, and everything to do with recognizing a kindred spirit who had seen his worth when no one else would. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.